Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at the box layout, which allows us to create drop-down menus. Okay, so this, what you can see here, is a drop-down menu. And you cannot see the drop-down of it because you need to click on it in order to create the drop or display the drop-down. But this little arrow here indicates that this should be a drop-down. So we're going to create our own drop-down UI element by using box and button. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Therefore, I'm going to go back to my application here and I'm going to get rid of the implementation of the on-click and this whole toast thingy. We don't need that for now. It was really just to show you how buttons look like and what a button should be, well, that a button can actually be interacted with. All right, so I'm going to get rid of the button entirely. We're going to add a button in a bit again. So inside of my row, I want to have a box. So there is this thing called box, which is a composable. So a box with no content that can participate in layout, drawing, pointer input due to the modifier applied to it. So this is what we're gonna use, the box. And then I'm just going to use curly brackets here. Now we need to import box. So import function box, and then we do that again. Now you might wonder, why do we need to import stuff again and again? The thing is, we add a box up here somewhere. It must be somewhere underneath those that we are layout box. The thing is that you want to keep your application as small as possible. So you don't want to import all of those packages that you might never use. So that's why it's more efficient to just use the imports that you actually use. So you see, we wouldn't need toast anymore because we don't use it. We wouldn't need buttons at this point anymore, as well as local context. So all of these are basically classes or pieces of code or a summary of classes or library of classes. And each of them obviously has or requires a bit of space. So the more of them you use, the more space your application will take in the end when installed on a phone of a given user. And you want to make sure that you're as efficient as possible and not waste the space of your users' phones. Okay, so that's the box. So a box is a layout element just like a row and column. It works differently in that it arranges and stacks composables on top of each other. It is commonly used to create custom and complex layouts because the drop-down menu cannot stand on its own, as it requires a parent which can help it position itself on the screen. So that is probably a thing that's and Google just hasn't come to yet, where they made it simpler to make drop-down menus, and this might change in the future, but this is basically the way we do it at this point. So we will first place a box within the row, where we will now place a button that then, when clicked, displays the selector. Okay, so each selector has its own box. They will be shown when triggered, and now that we have added those two boxes, let's go ahead and add buttons. So inside of our row box, so here, that's where I'm going to create a button, like so. Okay, it automatically is created for me. And inside of the contents, I'm going to have a text, and the text should say select. Okay, so that's the text of it. But then I can also add something called icon to a button. So the icon, I need to import again. So let's go and hover over it, import icon. And I'm going to import the composable icon because we're working with composables here, not the Android graphics drawable, but the actual composable icon. And then this icon needs some information as well, otherwise it will run into problems. So the icon that I want to use is this little arrow. So inside of icons, which is a summary or a class, so icons, you see I need to import icons as well. Let's import icons. I can use dot, default, dot, arrow, drop down. You can see here are on the left hand side, you can see the arrows or like the default items that are icons that you already have in Android by default. So these are not icons that you manually need to import or anything. So this is just the icon that I want to use. Now the icon needs additional information, like an additional parameter by default. So you see it needs the icon and it needs a content description. So here, content description, which I'm going to say set to empty. So what is a content description? Well, text used by accessibility services to describe what this icon represents. This should always be G-provided on G-provided. I don't know what this G stands for, unless the icon is used for decorative purposes and does not represent a meaningful action that the user can take. The text should be localized, such as by using the string resources. Okay, so what this basically means is that this is something you can add a text to that will then be used to read out what is happening on the screen for people who cannot see, for example. So if you're visually impaired and you're using the accessibility features and you don't know what this little icon is for, and the application doesn't know what this icon is for, that's where the content description comes into play, and you can actually say what should be said out when somebody hovers over this icon, or when the accessibility features of Android are reading out the screen, so to speak. So it's going to say a button, text, select, icon, and then whatever content description we have. So arrow down, for example. You can leave it empty, but if you want to use accessibility at any point, you can add arrow down. Now, if you want to make this localized so that it's available in different languages, you would also have to use the localization features of Android, which we're going to cover a lot later in the course. So it's really fine for now. So now that we have this icon, you could see it says select and then the arrow down. And now let's do the same thing for our second box. So I'm going to put it in here, and this one will also say select. So we have these two selecting items, and notice how we have two elements with the buttons block rather than one. You might wonder, is it a button or a layout? Well, it's not, but composables are flexible and can easily be customized to suit an interface that is not provided out of the box. So we can modify however we want stuff to look like. So while these aren't drop downs in a classical sense, they are still buttons, but we are going to use them as buttons. So while our user interface now is closed, if we look at what it looks like on our phone, we can see that it's still not very satisfactory because everything is pushed towards the top left corner of the application of the screen, and that's not really nice. So that's something we're going to fix in the next video. So see you there.